The second section of the book begins with a kind of long narrative poem that tells a little bit of a story, and it's a story that I think one of the central references is something that's probably on most of our cultural radars, Evel Knievel. I'm not familiar with Evel Knievel. If you grew up in the 70s and you were a little kid then, you had one of those motorcycles that you cranked and went shooting off, and he was an extreme icon for you. I don't know if they've reissued those or not, but I remember those as being desperately important to me as a kid. I moved to Spokane in '99, but I also lived up there '90 to '92, and I was out at this bar in '91 called the Baby Bar. It's about the size of this room from here over, and his friend bumped me and said, "That's Evel Knievel right there." And he was in there. He had a woman on each arm. He looked a little broken down, but he still kind of exuded some charisma. And something came full circle for me. I don't know what exactly, but he inhabits this poem in a very strange way, as well as, of course, Daedalus once again. Daedalus retires. Evel Knievel's last stunt: jumped the Mississippi near the DeSoto Bridge on a souped-up motorcycle from which, halfway across, he'll leap into the sky and rise higher on waxy wings and chicken feathers to swoop down into adoration in Arkansas. He recruits Daedalus as technical advisor, ignoring the hesitant letters of recommendation, researches DeSoto's brutal march from Florida to Mississippi, inspiring conquest, visits the balcony where Martin got shot, a fellow revolutionary, and hangs out at the pyramid, surrounded by reporters and fans, where he asks, "Why did pyramids go out of style? The Mississippi is a mile wide." Daedalus tells Evel to watch the altimeter, to switch to feathers at the exact apex, to trust them to glide him to shore. Evel poses in red, white, and blue for photographs in front of the silver pyramid, where he says those Egyptians could have learned something from steel. They steamroll housing projects to build a runway 3 miles long, tell tenants that this is about mythology, not privilege. Crazy white folks doing crazy shit, some mutter, aware of how history bulldozes the same people again and again. Evel Knievel revs the bike for hours. Some speculate he's gone chicken. Snake River broke his will, say he's heard the scuttle about Icarus. But then, varoom, the motorcycle screams by Beale Street, where a drunk passed out in the gutter dreams of God in a rocket. Evel's white fringe flapping in the wind as he launches over muddy water with gusto, with confidence, with verve. They never find the sunken motorcycle, and because the glider swoops into Arkansas downstream from the intended landing pad, the press reports are late, reliant on rumors from the crowd splayed out for miles on the western shore. Some witnesses describe Pentecostal fire, some recount a fluffy white cloud with tidings of a new kingdom. Some say they touched an old man in white leather before he limped off into the sunset. Back in Tennessee, reporters clamor for interviews, but the cagey Greek inventor ducks the spotlight, even declines an intimate sit-down with Oprah to help fans understand the depth of his loss, how he spends every day missing his boy. He retires instead to Spokane, and although he'll never sleep easy, he occasionally smiles because he knows that he lifted a reckless man into the holy land of Arkansas, wearing a white cape that was, according to one report, found near Fayetteville and displayed in City Hall, a crowd lining up on Saturdays to touch the dusty cloth and feel the fabric of life in the sky. Meanwhile, on the Great Plains, water troughs hoard rain against heat that slips gold into wheat stalks with a long, invisible kiss. Cattle gather at the silver ring near the shoulder of Highway 50 that also draws from the windmill's clattering pump, and when pickups swoosh beyond barbed wire, they raise their heads for a second, then return to slurping, a quick nod that signals gratitude for water and the sharp pleasure of the salt lick. Admit possession to rent. We stopped at a farmer's house before parking at the dock that creaked over the river, rowboats for rent, $5 an hour, 20 for the day. Deep water. I knew a canvas bag was in the trunk. I knew lunch would be roast beef sandwiches and hot stew from a thermos, chunks of carrot and potatoes cut by my mother who slept through the racket of our leaving. While my father paid, I loaded the boat with our poles and tackle boxes, lead sinkers shaped like gray pears, raincoats, and a case of beer. I was 10, and I knew my dad would toss that canvas bag into the aluminum boat with a thunk. We fish for gar with kittens, he yelled last night at my mother, and that was that. The rowboat slid from the dock, the occasional clunk of the first six-pack clipped on the fish stringer, and I knew that I should take my time fastening the wire leader to the brass swivel, tying on those massive sinkers. I knew that the 6-inch treble hook would tremble in my hands. And when I was done, I knew what came next. A canvas bag, stiff kittens, blood. I tore 2 hooks through the side of a calico, yanked upward with a sharp tug to lodge the 3rd barb beneath the ribs. I dangled my fingers in cold water to wash them, then reared the rod back into a cast that splashed 20 feet from the boat. He popped the 3rd beer and finished baiting his hook. Too deep for an anchor, we drifted, and far beneath the gar cruised back and forth, their prehistoric snouts slicing the dark, bumping our bait again and again until that fierce hunger I was learning said clamp down and take it. Now a few months ago I got an email from my aunt and she asked me, that didn't really happen, did it? And I was like, no, Rosemary, I just made it up. And she's like, I didn't think so. It's over the top, but that capacity for violence, unfortunately, I don't think is over the top. We all carry it. Meanwhile, high desert coulee near the banks of a spring creek, prickly hawthorn trees surround hollowed-out copses where scrawny black bears leave piles of scat decorated with dazzling, indigestible red berries. Another thing that we talked about a little bit today in the class that I went to was different types of poetry and being interested in the variety of different modes. And obviously that kind of story poem that I just read tries to give this extremity of experience and catalog it as if all of it happened, and it's very important that all of it happened. This is another poem that operates in one of those veins. There's a kind of sub-genre in American poetry of the working poems, and Philip Levine is probably the most famous poem in that subgenre, the most famous poet. And some of you that are very familiar with Philip Levine's work might hear a ripoff in here from one of his most famous early books, so we'll see. Still more work. The beetles bust their asses for days, stripping flesh from the dead cow, this overtime shift they didn't request but had to take. No one's in charge but the sun. Every now and then a crow carries a brother beetle from the bones high enough to glimpse mountains and the city where we scavenge the hide of hours, skeleton of days. Forget us. This is about cows with broken legs, the long rot, coyotes, hawks, and beetles with mandibles like opposable thumbs, a complete kit for taking bodies apart. Black lords of sage and hunger and dust, oh, how they labor in the heat. They know neither meek nor might. They feed, they lie on ribs, they creep across skull and hips and spine. And when nothing's left, dutiful members of the brutal union that trades hours for food, they crawl to death's next shift.